pandemic and the subsequent lockdown is unprecedented and has been the most difficult times in the last 100 years. Globally, it has adversely impacted human lives and economies to a level beyond comprehension. In India, it has grappled the country into grave economic crisis. It has heightened our sense of social insecurity, and this is largely due to the mass scale displacement of labor and the poor performance of the healthcare infrastructure. Last but not the least, it has affected mental health of almost all Indians during this time. COVID-19 has also alerted us about the institutional incapacities of the Indian state. So what is needed just now is much introspection. We need to seriously introspect and find out means and ways by means of which we can cope with such challenges in future. Identifying the shortcomings and gaps in macroeconomics, finance, public distribution system, public health and healthcare system is of utmost importance. I also feel that advancement and much attention is to be paid towards science education and research because these are the only solutions for future. Engaging higher intellectual capacities in designing public policies, institutional reforms, and above all, the prompt implementation of these policies will only lead us to a better status in future. Gitika Trust is an NPO dedicated and committed to the cause of developing the next generation of public intellectuals by inculcating a spirit of scientific inquiry in them and also instilling the values of social harmony and social justice. Today's virtual forum on the theme Roadmap Beyond COVID-19 is an initiative in this direction. I warmly welcome the panel this morning. Looking forward to your interaction and gathering valuable insights and recommendations from your end. I also welcome all participants who have joined us this morning. I would now like to hand it over to Rachna Agarwal to conduct the session. Rachna Agarwal is a specialist in international studies and is a very bright professional with SREI. Over to Rachna Agarwal. Thank you.
So this is Rachna. I, on behalf of Gitika Trust, would be your moderator for the session. I would help you introduce with all our esteemed panelists for the day. So we have 4 panelists today. We have Dr. Tapas Sengupta. He's a professor at Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Kolkata. He would be focusing on the roadmap beyond COVID in science, education and research. We have Ms. Sayoni Choudhuri Patra. She's the Assistant Professor, Political Science Department, Loreto College. She will be covering banking as an institution during the pandemic. Our third panelist is Ms. Apala Ghosh. She is an independent researcher and she would throw some light on the economic perspective during the pandemic, as well as will have some recommendations on what can we expect to change in coming days. Our fourth panelist and the youngest one of the lot is Ms. Archana Verma. She's pursuing her master's. She's a final year student, and she will be talking about our healthcare sector, how we can take a look at the technology and how healthcare can help us further develop in sync with the technological advancement in coming days. Without wasting any more further time, I would request Dr. Sengupta to please give us his remarks on the science education and research featuring Roadmap Beyond COVID. Dr. Sengupta, over to you.
And very good morning to all of you. And I really personally thank Gitika Trust for organizing such a timely and important panel discussion. And as Dr. Choudhury already mentioned, that this is an unexperience before events going on. The COVID-19 infection. We experienced different kind of epidemics like dengue, cholera in my lifetime, but this is something very chaotic and havoc. We are not ready for that. And this actually disrupted every corner, every aspect, and all sectors of our society and life. And we are basically, looks like we're traumatized. The kids, they do not know when their school will be opening. What is their future? The majority of us were doing some private job in private organizations. Maybe our salary already reduced, or you're not getting any salary. It's a very bad situation. We are not okay with our infrastructure to deal with such a case. And everybody is now focusing on COVID. So what about the other diseases? What about the overall economy? These are the actually big question in front of us, how to tackle, how to cope with, and how to go forward. So though it looks like apparently we are traumatized, but I'm a very optimistic person. So what basically you need to do, as Dr. Chowdhury fully pointed, we'll have to find or identify the problem, where the lacuna are, and how to design something for a better future. Okay? And for me, it is important that what is the role of science education and research with this aspect, and why we're thinking that science education and research is very important. Firstly, let me tell you, for any country to develop, what is primarily required, an overall scientific mindset. One person after studying need not to be a scientist, can be a chartered accountant, can be a painter, can be a singer. But from the very childhood, if we don't grow ourselves, if our society doesn't support ourselves to grow with a scientific mindset, then it is very difficult to think anything logically, to think something innovative way, to address a question with logic, and to design something to solve the problem with the logic. So that is the main essence of scientific education or science education and research. Now, in talking about the science education and research, let me very briefly tell that where we are now standing in terms of our education, school education, college education, university education, everything upstalled. But we resume something with respect to online teaching, online learning. But frankly speaking, a country like India, I would think that most of the students are staying in village basically, particularly under this lockdown situation. Whether the right technological platforms are available to them or not. So now we are experiencing that is a really huge problem. Even if we think of online education at that moment or in future for some reason. So we need to go forward to tackle that issue. So definitely policymakers will think about it. In my population, whatever the policy we make, we need to keep that population control also in our agenda. Where we stand means we are trying to actually help the final year students, whether at the HS level, ES level, MS level. What the PhD students, they are waiting for submission of the thesis. So we are trying to help them online. So that is a mechanism definitely. And some hope is there that if something is workable, if something is accessible. That is a good point. So I am optimistic about it. Now, where the research stand, mainly science research. So basically, there are numbers of different kind of projects that are going on in terms of different aspects of sciences, basic science, applied science, which are related to healthcare, clean air, clean water, how to maintain the biodiversity, drug development, and there's an endless list. But due to the COVID, it looks like everything is focused on COVID research, which is the need of the hour, definitely the need of the hour. But looks like every other research is got stopped. It should not be the way. But what is the mechanism to overcome? So we are thinking about it. So the important thing is that how we can go forward with respect to that. So definitely in the short term, we need to tackle the problem, we need to help the people in terms of education, other economic aspects, but we need to have a better or greater plan for our future. And as an educator, when I teach the really undergraduate and postgraduate, I believe that we need to ignite the scientific mind by reforming the school syllabus. We're reforming the school syllabus, college syllabus, and mainly for that, with our ex-president of the CBSE, actually, he rightfully pointed that 4 is actually important. One is engagement in education, I'm talking about, exploration, explain, and extension. Means you first ignite the curiosity about a topic in the mind of the students. And then tell them to just have some exploration that why it is important and build your own idea about it. Then there will be real student-teaching interaction that to explain that how to tackle, what is the problem, how to learn about it, to build a concept, and further extension is required. So we need to have a reform in our school education system with respect to science and other subjects. And that's applicable in college also. And research, there is a need of applied research, but we should not ignore about the very basic research or basic science research. Because that is actually the mother of all sorts of creativity, which can be applied in future. That is very much important. And through cross collaboration, we need to define some, what I should say, forefront research areas. So we are actually really anticipating. So this is just the beginning, looks like the way human civilization went on. We don't think about the environment. We don't think about anything else, looks like. Only our benefit or benefit of a species only called the Homo sapiens is not right. So it's really needed to address the issue that how to make a nature-friendly environment, how we can grow from the very childhood with a nature-friendly way. But to tackle our air problem, water problem, drug designing, agriculture, better crop production, something. So the way we actually damaged our environment, lots of other things may emerge, but not to be afraid of. We need to predict from the lesson of this pandemic how to be prepared, how to be ready, and how to design our every aspect of our life, education, research, our philosophy, to cope with, to go forward. So that is the remark initially I am making, and definitely next session we'll be discussing panel discussion and other question answering. We can really penetrate more further and deeper discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta. So I would like to now request Ms. Choudhury from Loreto College to give her remarks on banking as an institution, and what do we think, where are we going wrong, and what can the Indian government do better to tackle the pandemic.
A very good morning to my respected panelists. At the very onset, I'd like to thank the organizer, Gitika Trust. Before I go into the initial remarks, that I'm not just only touching down upon the banking sector, I'm also talking about the sustainability of the public health sector as well. Because we need to do more than just praising, eulogizing the health workers. Yes, they are frontline workers, but we will have to keep in mind that so far India has only invested 1.4% of the GDP into the public health sector. So if the pandemic has shaken us inside out, then we would also have to focus upon capacity building, research, cross-disciplinary collaboration, training the public health sector as well. We stand at 170 out of 188 countries enlisted by WHO in the health sector, which of course speaks very poorly of our condition and obviously the way we are responding to it. And if we go by prediction, then we expect that this is not the end of pandemic for this particular century. We might have many more hiccups, worse conditions as well, because the staggering effect of the COVID-19 may last for years, vaccine or medication, whatever may come. So we will have to prepare our health sector in that area. So if I may first speak about a few issues of the health sector in India which needs attention, that would be developing a protocol. That is, it's the first time, at least in my lifetime, I'm seeing that pan-national protocol for treatment, security protocols, treatment protocols are being developed. Otherwise, in this country, we have not seen protocols for oncology treatment. We have not seen protocols for many other intensive diseases. And at the same time, it has created a huge amount of difference between the private and the public healthcare system, where private healthcare is catering to 80% of the OPDs and 60% of the inpatient. Our obvious aversion to walk into a government hospital. So that culture difference, that logic of efficiency is only in the private health sector. These attitudinal barriers are also that have to be covered. And it is not just about the spick and span private hospitals. We all know that how mismanaged they are also. We have sufficient cases to an extent that the Chief Minister had to create a committee a few years back to look into those deficiencies. Of course, another area that I think post-COVID requires attention would be capping the cost of treatment. Again, highly discriminating treatment, whether it is again corona or whether it is even oncology, even TB treatment or vaccination for children. So just the way Amit Shah, respectable Home Minister, might have appointed GK Paul committee to look into the capping charges of the private sector, and the same initiative has been adopted in West Bengal as well. I think this is the gap that has to be bridged over the years as we try and recover from the jitters of this particular condition. Of course, another area which I personally feel very touched down upon, that is regularizing the other healthcare sectors. We have suspended diagnosis, we have suspended regular treatments from ordinary flu to even getting a stitch for a cut has become a major concern. That should not be the case. 53%, Times of India quotes day before yesterday newspaper, 53% of the hypertension patients' treatment has been suspended. So if you are doing that, of course, you are increasing life-threatening chances, whether that is thrombosis or stroke. These possibilities go up. So we are actually putting our larger human capital at risk. Of course, European Union emphasizes upon hospital infrastructure. We cannot be thinking anywhere or anything otherwise. And we also need to build consciousness. When doctors say that we are not going to treat patients because we do not have sufficient PPEs and everything, yes, it's a genuine concern, but when it comes out in the media, it obviously paints a very sad picture. Similarly, when people say, I don't want a COVID hospital in my locality, but I want treatment, that is also duplicacy that should not be entertained. We need to also educate. An awareness building has to be there. I'm sure all of us have seen that Corona has instilled more stigma among the patients and their families, the mistreatments that we have heard about. Of course, that is also not desirable. I think that is where public health needs to see in future. Coming to my second part, that is banking sector. Recently, Professor Kaushik Basu have cited that India has slided from being on the third position to the 23rd position in terms of growing economies in 2020. So that actually shows that an economy with very strong vitals has suffered because of the floundering of policies. So my major concern would be to see that we do not give out only loans, because loans are bureaucratic. Banks have to be debureaucratized. We need to have stimulus packages where you can unburden these applicants from the headache of repaying the loan. So I consider that the stimulus packages, simplifying them, implementing them, is much more essential if we have to get our economy walking, talking, and surviving. And of course, the entire dream that was sold to us during the third and the fourth phase of lockdown, that investments would be moving out of China and India would attract more investments, companies closing down their operation in China. Then let me tell you, in 2018, 56 companies moved out of China, and we only got 3 companies to do business in our country, while the larger share was taken up by Vietnam, Thailand, and the others. So yes, our economy continues to be bureaucratic in character. Banks continue to be very, very bureaucratic. Any one of us who have had a close brush of applying for any kind of loan, we know that what happens. So how does an MSMEs cope with such kind of promises that the Honorable Finance Minister has made day in, day out? And we also see that some of the sectors of the Indian economy are not yet being considered by the RBI for any kind of help, that is the textile and the hospitality. So that also requires a good amount of attention in the future.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chaudhary. In fact, I'm very curious to ask you a lot of questions. With that, I would like to now request Apala, our third panelist. She's an independent researcher, to talk about the economic perspective and what would be her recommendations for India going forward. Apala, over to you.
We've already experienced tragically low figures of fiscal growth since economic liberalization, especially in this year, and so many economies have already been affected. Although the state government has announced financial packages for the poor to the unorganized sector through PM Cares, Health Fund, etc., but I feel that this is not enough to overcome the present situation. So my paper basically deals with the roadmap which India's economy should follow if it must recover itself in a post-pandemic situation, and my roadmap basically touches upon 4 points. The first point would be the first point involves the FDI, the foreign direct investment. With the fall in global share prices, there is of course this big concern that China will take advantage of the situation, try to buy out Indian companies, participate in hostile takeovers. So the FDI policy should be changed in such a way so that the other countries cannot basically come over to India and acquire its companies and thereby, overtake the Indian economy. That is the first point. Second point would be, in fact, to ensure that we reduce our dependence on China for our drug imports, which is very important because as we've seen, the trends is that, especially which became revealed during the pandemic situation, was that we were dependent on China largely for a good amount of drug imports, and the scare that came during the pandemic situation was that with the pandemic breaking out, we would not be able to import these drugs, and India would face a lack of being able to provide essential drugs like paracetamol, etc., to the Indian population. So this actually brings to light the fact that this is the best time for the country to start reducing its dependence on China for importing of drugs, and to in fact start manufacturing its own drugs, start developing its own drugs, which would essentially help the Indian economy in the long run. Other than that, another very important issue was, in fact, the digital connect, which we've seen that, of course, our country also depends on Chinese imports for a lot of our digital equipments and devices. And during the pandemic, with the lockdown situation which was in place, it was very important for people to stay connected to each other, and this could only be done digitally. But with the pandemic situation, and of course, with the face-off with China that is happening currently, and the countries, thinking about stopping its imports from China regarding a number of items, including these digital devices. I think this is the time for India to start manufacturing its own digital devices in order to decrease its dependence on China for these essential items such as basic connectivity. So this is another issue which my paper touches upon. And last but not the least, of course, I must discuss about UBI, which is Universal Basic Income, which is a very important issue given today's economic situation. Even though the government is providing a basic economic packages, I really feel that is not enough. And for the long run, in order to effectively eradicate poverty, I feel that universal basic income would be a very good way to go and achieve this solution. However, there is the issue that universal basic income in the long run would possibly, allocate the money or the funds to the wrong people and to the wrong places. So for that reason, actually, there should be targeted transfers that make both political and moral sense, and cash transfers need to be desirable, but the cash transfers should not be provided to the rich in large numbers. It should basically go to the ones who are of poor economic condition. So these are basically the 4 points which my paper touches upon. And so, citizens have a right to minimum economic security. Hence, basic minimum income is a long-term solution, and better fiscal planning could be the starting point. In order to achieve UBI, I think further imposition of new taxes is needed in sectors which are capped too long, like agricultural income. Then we could also, redirect revenues which have been foregone and introduce fresh taxes for the wealthy. Another issue is that non-merit subsidies amount to about 5% of the GDP, and government can manage to provide some amount of money per person through UPI if some of these resources can be made available. Um, Other than that, of course, implementation may trigger problems because there's always the issue of proper allocation of the funds, but universal basic income is a necessity and it is not completely unaffordable. And it is very essential in order to, mitigate the looming crisis that comes with dwindling job opportunities. So yeah, basically that would be how the government could actually just at least start, start with the policy of a universal basic income. And UBI, of course, in its true sense, would entail the provision of an unconditional fixed amount to every citizen in the country. But political will, of course, in this situation has always been rather lukewarm because of the excess costs that are involved. So there is requirement to trim some of the existing subsidies to balance out the deficit, which is difficult currently given the political situation. But instead of shelving the proposition, we should actually go through with it and finally introduce an unconditional regular paycheck at maximum universality, at least until the economy normalizes, and then continue doing it through a targeted moral sense.
So, Rachna, over to you. Thank you, Rachna. Good afternoon, everybody. I am actually, before starting my views on my health sector, I would like to thank Dr. Chowdhury for just giving me an opportunity and platform, since I'm the young panelist present. Now, the pandemic has actually displayed a very clear picture that our health system is very weak. It's not actually much strong and developed. So therefore, I will be highlighting on certain areas which will actually play a very fruitful role in making a health system much more developed and strong. So first and foremost area is money. Now, the pandemic has made it very clear that we do not invest much in a health system. According to the annual data released by the government, it states that the government has spent only 1.6% of its GDP in the financial year 2020. In comparison, many developed countries like US, UK, Germany, they spend quite a lot in the health sector. So what we need to do is increase the spending in the health sector. Though the present central government have decided to increase the spending by 2.5%, what is actually required is its implementation in reality. And due to this lack of funding, what we are seeing is our medical infrastructure is very weak. Our hospitals do not have proper development, proper infrastructure. They do not even have basic water supply, electricity. Emergency units are not well equipped to deliver emergency cases. Why is this so? This is basically because our medical infrastructure is weak. There's lack of funding and investment. So the government needs to look into this. It has to ensure that these hospitals are developed, at least developed enough to provide basic health services to the people of our country. And with this increase in funding, what the government can actually do is they can actually provide free treatment to the poor people of our country. They can actually provide the medical insurance so that they can avail treatment from private hospitals. So funding and money is one of the primary area the government should focus upon. Second is technology. Today we are using technology in many sectors. So why not health? Health too can be technology oriented. Now, just like mobile vans can be used to deliver vaccines, telemedicine can be used by doctors to connect with patients, to avoid physical visits to hospitals or clinics. Along with that, mention here I should be making of IDSP. IDSP is basically Integrated Disease Surveillance Program with the use of ICT systems. This is not something new in our country. It was launched quite back in the year 2004, but its implementation is very minimal. And the surveillance is quite important. There are many reasons for it. I will just highlight a few of them. Firstly, it recognizes cases or cluster of cases to reduce morbidity, mortality, prevent transmission. It identifies high-risk groups or even geographical areas to target interventions, monitors effectiveness, and prevents outbreaks. So the use of this program should be much encouraged in our country. Third is medical professionals. Now, the doctor population ratio in our country is 1:1,456 as against the WHO recommendation 1:1,000. So this makes a very clear picture that our country is facing shortage of medical professionals. What we need to do is, we need to increase the number of seats in MBBS and PG colleges, provide early trainings to the students, especially of the fourth year, so that they can actually provide services to the hospitals as form of the internships. The government needs to look into this. They are doing so, but then at a very minimal level, since unless and until this shortage of medical professionals is adhered to, I don't think so we will be able to provide health services to the people of our country. The fourth area is role of NGOs, where on one hand there is shortage of medical professionals in our country. On the other, what the government can do is, it can actually enhance the role of NGOs. Since the NGOs are quite capable enough of providing basic facilities, since they have their rootings at the grassroots level. So the role of NGOs should be enhanced. Government should actually collaborate with these NGOs in providing basic services to the people so that this pressure on the hospitals can actually be lower. E-pharmacies. Now, e-pharmacies' role should also be much more encouraged. They're quite accessible, quite quick, and actually what is most important is they provide medicines at a very affordable costs. So enhancing this role of NGOs can play a very positive role in improving our health system. And these few, I think so, can play a very fruitful, a very helpful role in making our health system much more strong. So what the India should do is having a quality and accessible healthcare service can actually provide a very key competitive strength for our country. So therefore, this time has come for our country to play a very positive role to develop our medical services and facilities so that our country can actually become a progressed one. So over to you, Rachna. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana. I would like to open the e-floor to the panelists to ask some questions. So over to the panelists, please.
So my question will be first to the youngest one, the Archana. So can you a little bit elaborate on that IDSP, which is very interesting to me, and I'll try to correlate it and convey to the higher authority.
So IDSP basically is not something new in our country. It was actually launched quite a year 2004 by our Honorable Indian Minister of Health and Family Welfare. Now, this was actually the basic objective for this program. I would like to make it clear, Professor Sengupta, that is basically to strengthen or maintain decentralized laboratory-based IT-enabled disease surveillance system for epidemic-prone diseases, to basically to monitor disease trends, to detect and respond to outbreaks in early rising phase. So with the implementation of this IDSP, actually we can monitor the early outbreaks and we can actually deter to provide treatments also. So using this program would be quite helpful in such pandemics, in such cases of pandemics. And so basically it assesses the public health impact of health events or determines the major trends. So this IDSP could play a very positive role in any such kind of pandemics or chronic illnesses. Maybe in future as well, we will be having many such pandemics to come. So this will actually trigger, help us to analyze, any such pandemics, or we can actually reduce these negative. These effects of the pandemic. We can actually reduce it to a lot of extent by actually monitoring it on a very early phase.
May I ask one more question to Apala? So, what I really liked, very interesting and important from your view, that the minimum economic security, every citizen has the right to have it. Definitely by sitting idle in a home and expect that minimum security is not possible though. But what, you can go a little bit deeper, that how it can be ensured by participation of both the government and the citizens, good citizens, to achieve that minimum economic security.
Thank you for the question. So, like I said, that it is not really easy to immediately achieve economic security because it's something that can only be achieved in the long run. However, of course, essential and genuine participation of the government in order to achieve this is very important. And some of the ways in which, of course, this can be achieved is, you know, like first of all, the government can provide some of the money through doing away with the non-merit schemes, then redirecting a lot of the revenue which gets foregone. Then, of course, very essential is introducing fresh taxes for the wealthy. It's very essential for us to start redistributing the money so that at least some amount of the money flows towards the poor. Then, of course, non-merit subsidies amount to a large percent of the gross domestic product of the country. So some of these revenues can, of course, be made available for universal basic income. Yeah, so basically I think this is how it can be achieved, basically through, allocating funds and using any sort of revenue which usually does not get used. The government actually starts taking steps towards some form of a solid universal basic income plan. Thank you.
And to Sayoni, so what is your opinion? If you are given an opportunity to directly talk to the ministry or the government level or Niti Aayog, what are you going to suggest or how to actually keep bureaucratization of this banking system, what you mentioned, and to be more friendly towards the startups and who are trying to do something based on the knowledge based on the education to upgrade the economy. So it's an indirect investment we can think of. So can we think in that angle, or I'm thinking the wrong way?
In case of a suggestion, I think debureaucratization we will have to. I think we'll have to go back to what 1990s was. What was Narasimha Rao and the then Finance Minister Manmohan Singh's recommendation was that they broke down the license Raj. Now we would have to be more professional. We may not have a license Raj, but I don't think any one of us can say we have any less paperwork, the amount of paperwork that are needed. Now also, if you look into the online application, I'm sure again we are saying the same thing, the number of forms do not go down. It has become even more problematic. Shrink your file size, shrink your photograph size, and thereby you continue to do the same amount of work, if not on paper, on pen, but you continue to do typing on your system. So a certain amount of, when everything is linked, when my PAN is linked, my Aadhaar is linked, that why there is so much of paperwork. As an organization, I have a PAN, you know my tax background, you can look into it in a minute. That is what bank says, you walk in and walk out with loans, but that actually doesn't happen. So there's a gap between what is being promised and what is being worked out. I think instead of having an entire policy of changing how we work, it is, I consider it is more unprofessional, it is more attitudinal issue, that there is always a doubt that if you give money to an MSME, you will lose it out. But you didn't shy away giving money to Kingfisher, and that entire money ran out, flying out of this country. You cannot sort insolvency cases against DFHL because of the lockdown, but you can definitely drag those small businessmen into the trial for years and years. And of course, we are not even thinking about how they are harassed by the organization, the police, and others. So there is a basic attitude, and I think that attitude is rich and poor gap. The rich businessman versus the poor businessman. We may have many perfect policies on paper. We are not implementing it correctly. Whether it is the lower level bureaucracy or whether it is the higher level bureaucracy. Over the years, I think the higher level bureaucracy has always been political. We cannot say that they were not congressmen, or today they are not the BJP or the Sanghis. But I think the lower level bureaucracy is no longer just corruption as a problem. You know, do not only need to warm up their pockets, but also in terms of the politicization, their affiliation, your background. They would rather check out on locality of your political affiliation. I may be wrong, I may not be able to give you a direct statistics, that startups often generate their own money. I will work for these many years, save this much amount of money, and then I will float a business. We look for funding among the family members. We look for funding among friends who are in abroad, who can be interested in some amount of, if they are well off economically, to help us out, to give us an exposure. So this is what has been. We are somehow not able to tap the talent because of this over politicization of the banking system with such rigid and narrow-minded bureaucratic setup.
Yeah, you rightfully addressed the issue. So now for others.
No, I think one of my question is already in the chat box from Dr. Basundhara Chowdhury. That is, are we genuinely going to get a vaccine by 15th of August?
So vaccine actually the thing that it protects, is a precautionary measure. So two powerful research is going on throughout the globe, including India. First, how to treat a COVID patient. You cannot treat a patient who is already suffering with the vaccine. Either he has to be antibody treatment or some small molecule drug. And in order to do that, you need to really understand the structure of the virus, how it looks, what are the molecules are involved. It is known though, but these molecules they change very rapidly. So it's very difficult to fight an attack. The vaccine is a better approach in that sense that you are protecting the society. We all had our cholera vaccination, BCGs. So by that we can develop something or not. The problem what actually will appear in my understanding, but I hope I am wrong, but still based on my experience and understanding. So what happened actually, you just change a virus to an inactive form or weak form, or you take a component out of the virus, which is cannot cause the infection, and good enough to ignite, to prime our immune system. So if our immune system is now upgraded with respect to this particular component, it will be primed, so we will be able to attack. Our immune system will be able to attack whenever we get infected. But if we get infected by a different kind of virus, it took a little bit of disguise. It changes surface component, then it's very difficult. But this research is going on that what are the different variety of these coronaviruses. So this is not the only coronavirus. There are hundreds of variety, but this COVID is causing a very, very big problem for us. If we understand that in different countries at different levels, how they're changing their surface, then if we find that one component is not changing that much, that is participate in binding with ourselves to get entry, then we can develop a good vaccine. So this research is going on in our country. Recently, our Bharat Biotech also announced something, but it needs, my concern is it needs a much thorough investigation, trial and such. So what Basundhara asked and maybe others question, let us hope for the vaccine, but for influenza, we could not develop a real right vaccine. Even cholera, bacteria, we could not develop the right vaccine. It depends on the what kind of disease we are talking about, what are the positive agent, what are the surface antigen. But with better knowledge, our drug designing approach, talking that how our host cell and virus can interact, can inhibit is better, and research is going on. And I hope that we'll be able to come up with some vaccine definitely, like influenza vaccine, which can protect to some extent. But by that way, when it will go on, I'm going to share a very good news with you all that looks like to me that we are acquiring some community immunity. It's called the herd immunity. So the number of cases are increasing, but the severity will decrease with time. But you never know. That's why we need a strong and good vaccine. And I cannot tell 100% sure that whether we'll be able to achieve a perfect vaccine like BCG or tuberculosis vaccine. But let us hope for the best.
All right. I have a couple of questions for Professor Sengupta, which I would like to put across. So my first question for Professor Sengupta would be, as a researcher, what do you think of about our basic education system to be upgraded, considering the situation that we have right now and whatever we have in our curriculum, like in the education system? Do you think that there has to be certain changes and upgradation to make our coming generation aware of economy, health, science, technology? Of course, it could be an addition to what we already have, or it should be modified. So what is your take on our future generation education system?
Absolutely. But the thing is that before going there, let me tell you that in the rural areas, recently 30% attendance increase in participation by the poor students because of the midday meal. So what it tells that they are actually suffering. They are having empty stomach. So it has to be checked there first, that how to help them in terms of economy. But again, what is going to happen first? This question again arises. So government definitely will put some effort there. We should pressurize our government in different way. But the thing is that we need to change the overall approach for teaching the students. They have to be more creative. They have to be more intuitive and innovative in nature. But all are becoming a money-making avenue because they are investing huge and ultimately their calculation how much money are going to make. I'm not ignoring their contribution for the society. The whole mindset has to be changed. More creative, more innovative. So we have to decrease the load, basically, of what they're actually studying. Only feeding them with the information is not good enough. We need to upgrade their knowledge base, but more importantly, to upgrade their thinking ability. That's why hybrid approach is required. And our online system can really take huge participation there, different kinds of gadgets and other. But it has to reach to the poor people. That's important. We need to have more creative approach, outcome-based approach, and this reform is required. And more and more interactive sessions are required to tell them from the very beginning what is the importance to be a good citizen, what is important to have a good health, good practice, and how to have a good morality. These are very much needed from the very beginning in every sector. So there is a program actually launched by the government, I think 2013, it's called the Rashtriya Avishkar Abhijan. So how to build some demonstration-based modules for learning and teaching. Everyday life module, that how to learn some aspect of the physics, some aspect of the chemistry, how can apply mathematics to solve an everyday life problem. We need to produce or generate some modules for that. Change has to be there to equip the students with the more and more thinking power. Ultimately, that will help. They should come up with, the major section will come up with innovative ideas to help our technology, which are really lacking, to self-sustainable and self-generated technologies in medical sector and other sectors is very much needed to decrease the dependency on China and other countries. This reform, this addition or amendment is required, and this initiation already started at the level of the MHRD, NITI Aayog. I'm not a government spokesperson here. I know what is going on, but I believe much more is needed to be done. It's only doable by participation of the whole society. Okay, so thinking about it, giving the input, and we the educators are doing it to equip them more in terms of innovative ideas. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta. So there's one more question which had come from the audience. This is from Rachna Choudhuri, who questions you. What is the role you envision digital initiatives, smart sensors, mental health applications, artificial intelligence to play in supporting in public health system in India?
Huge potential is there. I can see huge future of it. But again, before going to let me tell, it has to be accessible to the larger section of the people. This mobile healthcare system and other things, robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these things are already started in India, frankly speaking. And mainly at that level now, there are some private hospitals you can go for mobile consultation and other things. But it has to be further extended to the other hospital and other healthcare system. So I see the huge application of these robotics or artificial intelligence in our healthcare sector. But it will take time. It will take time. It's not going to happen in coming 1 or 2 years. It will take maybe 10 years in my anticipation. But it started, it would be started, because it is numbers of process to have a better coordination. Okay? So it's really helpful. And it will decrease the load of the OPDs in the hospitals.
Thank you for your thought-provoking remarks, Professor Sengupta. So the last question that I have, which can be addressed, is that the health system is completely dependent on the state government. It's more of like, you should go to the state government, the state hospitals could help you. But what is your take on joint public-private partnership in healthcare? Will it improve? What would be the ideal situation?
See, today we are seeing public-private partnerships in various sectors, be it transport or be it in industrial manufacturing sector, we are seeing it. So having public-private partnership in health sector would be a lot beneficial. Today in this present situation, what are we noticing? We're basically noticing the government infrastructure is not much developed. There is shortage of maybe beds. The Delhi government, we are seeing shortage of beds. They don't have proper ventilators, shortage of medical equipments, PPE equipments. Basically because the government hospitals are facing a lot of burden. They don't have that much funding. So actually having public-private partnerships, this private sectors actually can come in and they can actually provide investments in this health sector. They can actually provide medical professionals, and the way of treatment is actually much more effective, and people actually rely on more private sectors because they're more efficient in providing health services compared to government sector, which are much more laid, which are much more loom. They're not much effective, and efficiency is very downgraded compared to the private sector. So having this public-private partnership will give a boost to the health sector, where the government can actually look upon infrastructure and marketing, and the private sector can look upon providing medical equipments and drugs and providing medical professionals. So this to an extent could be a lot beneficial. So Ma'am Choudhury, if you want to highlight anything else, you can go ahead. Yes, of course, on pen and paper, public-private partnership is something which is very desirable. But even in public-private partnership, the issue of quality and service remains questionable. That we are standing at a ratio of 1 doctor is to 1800 in this country. Okay, so are private sectors going to put in more doctors? Can private sectors prevent brain drain of medical professionals from this country? Or are private medical colleges can fill up this decreasing ratio of availability of doctors that remain? And in the public-private partnership, the major concern remains that they would give us the supplies, the equipments and training and everything. Then also they would try to have a larger share of their investment. The return on the investment would be a lookout. So that shows that there has to be a harmony. It should not, the private sector continues to be still profit and highly motivated by only profit in this country. That attitude of service and commitment to the society is much more on paper and on the walls of the hospital than I actually see in practice. That is why even if this pandemic larger population survives, if you look into the comorbidity sector, so what are the private hospitals actually doing? Why can't they start their service? I'm sure they have more resources than the government hospitals. But there is a very serious reservation for them. They have acted more paranoid than government hospitals. So this is, and again I have to use the word I think I have used more than thrice today, the attitudinal barrier. That service understanding of the private sector is not there to have a very equitable working of public-private partnership. And maybe that is why Arogya Bharat would remain, again, like many other things, on paper.
Thank you, Ms. Choudhury. So I would like to now wrap up. We have actually exceeded a lot, and
looking at the chat box, Sujata Chowdhury raised a question. So I want to answer it very quickly. He raised a question about that, what our Indian institutes are doing anything regarding the test kit to for the knowledge of Ashram and others. That now in India, we are using actually the IIT Delhi developed kit, but getting manufactured by Indo-Korea company called the SD Biosensors. So it is indigenous developed kit we are actually basically using. His second question was about specifically on the Covaxin, and I think I co-opine with Basudev that without the proper human clinical trial, it should not be launched. Okay, so thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Professor, for taking the questions, although we were running out of time. I would really like to thank Gitika Trust for giving us this opportunity for us students to do this. I think it's very encouraging for me, being a past student of Dr. Choudhury. This really makes us feel great about being your students, and I'm sure Archana and Apala have similar feeling. So thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Okay, so on behalf of Dr. Choudhury and Gitika Trust, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all the panelists for sharing their findings and opinions today. I would first take the opportunity to thank Dr. Tapas Sengupta for helping us understand the science behind the vaccine and also having an inclusive educational policy that respects nature for the future roadmap of India. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Sayoni Choudhuri Patra for understanding the impact of COVID on not only on banking and financial institutions but for public healthcare infrastructure as well. And to our young researchers, Apala Ghosh, for helping us understand why the necessity of universal payment scheme is the need of the hour, and also to Archana Verma for making us understand how we need to create emergency response systems for pandemic of COVID and in the future. Finally, this event would not have been a success had it not been for the unflinching support of Rachna Agarwal and her coordination activity. I would also like to thank Somik Banerjee for his technical assistance. Finally, I would like to thank all our participants for having this wonderful discussion today. Thank you for joining.